I'm Linor Moudou in for Esther Gitu-Ewart. It's Thursday, July 28th. This is Africa 54.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov wraps up his tour of Africa as he tries to boost support for Russia's war in Ukraine. Enticed with gifts from political leaders, many young voters in Kenya are attending rallies for cash handouts. But will the money for votes plan work on election day? And a South African hospital becomes the first government facility to perform robotic-assisted surgical procedures.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has ended his diplomacy trip to Africa, visiting Egypt, the Republic of Congo, Uganda, and Ethiopia. Topping his agenda was garnering support from those nations for Russia's position on the war in Ukraine. Paul Ndiho has this report.
Flying across Africa to win support for Russia's war in Ukraine, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has concluded his trip to Egypt, Congo-Brazzaville, Uganda, and Ethiopia, where he thought to portray the West as a villain, blaming it for rising food prices and denying his country was responsible for the global surge in food price following its invasion of Ukraine. Addressing reporters and African diplomats in Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa, Lavrov accused the United States and European countries of driving up prices by pursuing reckless grain policies and even hoarding food during the COVID-19 pandemic.
The situation in Ukraine did additionally negatively affect the food markets, but not because of the Russian special operation, rather due to the absolutely inadequate reaction of the West, which announced sanctions, undermining the availability of food on the markets.
Many African countries rely heavily on wheat imports from Russia and Ukraine, and African leaders visited Moscow to express their food security concerns. Natalia Bogoyova, a critic of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, says that Lavrov's trip to Africa aims to cast Russia in a positive light.
Russia's blockade of grain in Ukraine's ports and deliberate destruction of Ukrainian agricultural capabilities is at the center of this effort, as Russia is trying to falsely link Ukraine's grain export with sanctions against Russia and to falsely frame Ukraine as a responsible party in the global food crisis.
However, vulnerable African countries and elsewhere around the world have been hit hard by the fallout from the war that has sent the prices of fuel and food soaring.
Certainly, the region is feeling the impact and the implications of food insecurity. The USAID Administrator, Ambassador Samantha Power, was just out in the region and announced $1.3 billion of assistance.
In March, the UN General Assembly overwhelmingly approved a resolution blaming Russia for the humanitarian crisis in Ukraine. But Russia's influence in Africa was on display during the vote as 28 African nations voted in favor of the resolution, but 25 African countries either voted to abstain or did not vote at all. Russia's relations with the West have been severely damaged over the Ukraine conflict, and Lavrov says Africa will play a more significant role in Russia's foreign policy. Paul Ndiho, VOA News, Washington.
For more perspective on Sergei Lavrov's visit to Africa, Kwaku Nwama, a professor of international politics at American University here in Washington, is joining us via Skype live. Professor Kwaku Nwama, thank you so much for joining us. What is your analysis of Sergei Lavrov's visit to Africa overall? What are some of the main takeaways?
Thanks for having me. I think it's a mixed bag. In terms of optics, it is probably successful because we see Sergei Lavrov meeting with African leaders who were heaping praise on him. President Yoweri Museveni, President of Ethiopia, basically hailed as a friend of Africa. And so in terms of the PR fight, this trip would be a win for the Russians. They also succeeded in putting out a counter narrative to the question of why Africa is suffering right now. They're countering the prevailing narrative that is the Russian war is what's causing difficulties for Africans, and the Russians have been suggesting that this is actually the cause this was caused by the sanctions imposed by the West. A third win would be the pressure that this visit and the reception that he's received puts on the pressure that it puts on the relationship that exists between Africa and the Western Alliance. The West remains Africa's major partner in global affairs, and Lavrov showing up, there's a new narrative. You can see the Western powers rushing into the region to try and counter this new narrative that is being woven. So
let me ask you this. President of France, Emmanuel Macron, just concluded a trip to Africa as well. What do you make of this coincidence of the French president and the Russian minister there at the same time?
So the West realized that you can't have a vacuum in this information warfare that's going on. And it's not just Macron that's there. We've seen Mark Hammer from the United States, and Samantha Power is also there. And they are also putting information out there as Sergei Lavrov is trying to get Africans to their side. I think Macron had a major gaffe when he talked about African hypocrisy. That doesn't help their relationship. It doesn't help the relationship. So Africans don't like to be spoken to as like children. These are sovereign states. They have a right to decide which side they want to back in this war, or whether they want to be neutral or not. I think that comes with a cost that we're not talking about. Being neutral in a war like this will hurt you in the long run. But it doesn't help when the president of France, one of the foremost colonial powers in Africa, shows up and calls Africans hypocrites and tries to talk as if Africans should support the Western side in this conflict without looking at their own interests. So I think that he missed a huge opportunity to push back. And we've already seen Russia dislodging Africa as France as a major security actor in the Sahel.
Okay.
And this is something that we need to pay attention to, because in the end, there will be costs. Okay,
Professor, we have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
Kwaku Nwama is a professor of international politics at American University here in Washington. French President Emmanuel Macron wrapped up the third leg of his visit to Africa on Thursday in Guinea-Bissau as its leader, Umaro Sissoco Embalo, takes the helm of the Economic Community of West African States. Macron arrived in Guinea-Bissau late Wednesday and was warmly greeted at the Osvaldo Vieira International Airport by a girl offering him a bouquet of flowers and dignitaries, including President Sissoco Embalo. The two leaders shook hands and walked together before Macron also shook hands with a ministerial delegation. Later, Macron and Sissoco drove away in a presidential convoy to a hotel where they were also met warmly. Macron was in Benin one day earlier, promising more support for West African nations battling extremist threats. Clara Frank has more.
Benin's President Patrice Talon met with his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron on Wednesday. The French president's visit to Africa, in part, is a bid to strengthen political and security ties. That's amid France's withdrawal of thousands of troops from Mali after decades fighting militants. Benin, alongside the Gulf of Guinea states Togo and Ivory Coast, has seen increasing attacks from militants linked to al-Qaeda and Islamic State as violence spreads south from the Sahel countries of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. Macron says France could deliver drones and more sophisticated weapons to Benin to enable the West African nation to tackle the worsening Islamist insurgent threat in the region. Macron added that France is already providing Benin with intelligence, training support, and other civilian aid to help develop areas that are vulnerable to jihadist threats. A French official said France is likely to respond positively to requests from Benin and other countries for air support and intelligence to combat such groups. Macron's Africa tour comes amid the backdrop of the Russian war in Ukraine and the presence in Mali of Russian military contractors from the Wagner Group. Speaking in Cameroon Tuesday, Macron said that France, as a, quote, friend of Africa, would do everything to prevent Russian influence on the continent from spreading too much.
This hybrid Russian presence, which involves misinformation, militias, new forms of what I have trouble qualifying as cooperation.
During his early stop in Cameroon, Macron said France would expand counterinsurgency operations in Gulf of Guinea countries that are now dealing with terrorist groups. Clara Frank, VOA News, Washington.
Nigerian workers under the Nigerian Labour Congress have joined the Lecturers' Union to protest a payment dispute and an unfulfilled government promise to invest $500 million in public universities. The Academic Staff Union of Universities began a national strike on February 14th, keeping millions of Nigerian students out of classes. Timothy Obiezu reports from Abuja.
The university lecture strike is the main reason that has brought these protesters to the streets. But here, protesters are saying there are more issues that need to be addressed, including insecurities and the dwindling economy. These, they say, are fallouts from years of negligence in the education system.
The children of the working class, the children of the less privileged, have been at home for the past 5 months, and nobody cares. No reason is good enough for the children of the working class and the poor to be at home for 1 day.
The Nigerian Labour Congress is the main umbrella body representing millions of workers across various sectors of the Nigerian economy, including lecturers. University lecturers walked out of classrooms since February the 14th after accusing authorities of failing to honor a 2009 agreement to invest $500 million to revamp public universities. They also said the payouts of lecturers are too poor when compared to their counterparts elsewhere. But in February, authorities said they had met part of the agreement and were working to pay the rest. But protesters say what the government paid did not meet expectations.
The president just signed $37 billion for the renovation of the House of Assembly. Tell me, at this crucial time, is that a priority? It's not. People are dying, the economy is dying, we have debt.
Seriously, ASU strike have affected me. By now, I should be a graduate of university. For presently now, I'm a 300-level student.
The strike affects more than 8 million Nigerian students in public tertiary institutions, while their counterparts in private universities continue to attend classes.
They agreed that they will spread this payment over 6 years, and they signed by giving 220 billion naira every year to the Nigerian universities. If they had been done, today we would have gone far beyond where we are today. But what happened? They did nothing.
A similar strike in 2020 lasted for 9 months before it was called off. Timothy Obiezu for VOA News, Abuja, Nigeria.
Kenyan presidential candidate William Ruto participated in a one-sided election debate after his main opponent didn't show up. Veteran opposition leader Raila Odinga had earlier issued a statement saying he could not debate with Ruto, who he described as having, quote, no regard for ethics and public morals. Kenyans in Nairobi had this reaction.
For me, I won't say it was a debate because a debate needs to be two people. Or two or more. So for me, I would really say it wasn't really an effective debate because for a single person, that was a question and answer. So I did not expect much, and everything that I was looking forward to see in a debate, I didn't get it, and it did not change the point that or the way I was to vote for the coming election.
I was actually disappointed because 2 of the 4 president aspirants did not show up. Very disappointed. But I was impressed by the ones that showed up. At least they showed that they can commit to something. So we're not even scared about if they become president.
The reason I didn't watch the debates is because I feel like they lie to us so much. And if I want to be lied to, I should just live and lie to myself about dreams that I want to achieve.
Kenyans in Nairobi reacting to the presidential debate. Now, as Kenya heads to the polls on August 9th, on giant voting bloc could be largely missing. Enticed with gifts from political leaders, many young voters attend rallies for the cash handouts. But come election day, just how many will vote? Africa 54 managing editor Vincent McCurry has more.
As a familiar campaign jingle brings the Kenyan crowd to their feet, Irene Owino might join her compatriots and sway to the catchy tune at a political rally in the lakeside city of Kisumu. Just don't expect the 23-year-old to vote.
I've seen politicians come and give us money. Some will come with 100 bob, 200 bob, 500 bob to give us money so that on the 9th of August we can vote for them.
Currently without a job, the former fishmonger says she is so fed up with the country's insular political class that she plans to stay home when Kenya votes on August the 9th in parliamentary and presidential polls. She is not alone.
For me, I can't vote because I'm self-independent. I'm doing everything alone, and the government is there watching. I'm struggling all alone. I'm paying taxes. So there's no way I can vote if it's not chipping into my life.
The East African economic powerhouse ranks among the world's youngest countries. 3/4 of Kenyans are under 34, according to government figures. Many have no interest in participating in an electoral process they widely dismiss as corrupt and pointless. Yet, although young Kenyans are less tribally minded, they also lack ideological steadfastness, according to a Kisumu-based political analyst, Francis Owor.
Indeed, there is a high level of voter apathy, especially among the youth, and it's a valid concern to policymakers, to government, to politicians, and everyone, because at the end of the day, it affects voter turnout. It affects the obligation citizens have in the political process, because it is through voting that wananchi makes their voice known.
30 years after the emergence of multi-party democracy in Kenya, many are disillusioned by constant battles over the credibility of polls and disputed election results.
On the issue of handouts, it doesn't have much to do with voter apathy or lack of civic education. It is an orientation. People have come to believe that politics pays, because they see their leaders, our leaders, the kind of vehicles that they drive, the kind of wealth that they own, and the display without feeling embarrassed. So people have realized that there's money in politics.
This year's presidential vote is largely a two-horse race between Deputy President William Ruto, 55, and Raila Odinga, the 77-year-old veteran opposition leader who is now backed by the ruling party. Vincent McCurry, VOA News, Washington.
Senegalese voters are expressing hope for reforms ahead of Sunday's legislative elections. Many see the elections as a test ahead of scheduled presidential elections in February 2024. Senegal's main opposition coalition is vying to gain clout in legislative polls Sunday that will set the scene for the 2024 presidential election that could see President Macky Sall run for a controversial third term. Tension is high in Senegal since violent protests erupted last year after Sall's main opponent, Ousmane Sonko, was arrested on rape charges. He denies the allegations. Many voters are frustrated with economic hardship brought on by COVID pandemic and the rising prices of food and fuel linked to the war in Ukraine.
Senegal is facing difficult times due to the floods, due to COVID-19, and to the increase in the price of basic goods. Faced with this situation, the Senegalese are obliged to face up to it and give their point of view to history. What is history? Today, it is to advocate change, change with regard to the National Assembly. Today, we need a coalition, and this coalition will allow the executive to work in harmony with the opposition so that Senegal can move forward.
This new assembly must make constitutional reforms. There are debates that the MPs must definitely settle. The issue of term limits in Senegal must be clarified. The issue of violence in politics must also be addressed. And also, MPs must ensure the independence of the people so that they can have the right to demonstrate without any hindrance. Secondly, we need to be informed about the fate of the oil and gas recently discovered in Senegal.
Some opponents fear Sall will breach a constitutional two-term limit and run again in 2024, an option he has neither confirmed nor denied. We are excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and all of our VOA Africa programs on our website at voaafrica.com. Follow us. Still to come, a South African hospital performs robotic-assisted surgery. We'll be right back.
Continent blessed with a wealth of assets, from human capital to vital minerals to agricultural and water resources, just to name but a few. However, an estimate of 600 million Africans are without access to electricity, a basic necessity of life. On this week's Our Voices, we are taking an in-depth look at how countries on the continent are utilizing their resources, particularly solar energy, to power their nations. Join the conversation each week right here on Our Voices.
From around the world, let's go.
Human Rights Watch says Morocco is jailing journalists after flawed trials for non-political crimes, particularly sexual ones, in order to silence them. And it's part of a range of techniques of repression. Militia sources say jihadists killed 3 policemen and a vigilante in an ambush on the convoy of a local official in northeast Nigeria's Borno state. And Ivory Coast is reporting a fresh discovery of offshore oil and natural gas by the Italian firm Eni. Now, a new report by the United Nations AIDS program reveals that more than 1.5 million people worldwide were infected with HIV in 2021, many of them young girls. The report reveals global disruptions, including the COVID-19 pandemic and the war in Ukraine, have slowed many HIV prevention efforts. The joint United Nations program on HIV and AIDS says progress is stalling, and ending HIV/AIDS by 2030, and action is needed to get it back on track. Researchers say there is hope in the treatment of HIV, as 2 patients appear to have beaten the virus. One case involved an American man with cancer who underwent a specialized stem cell transplant. The other patient is a woman in Spain who received immune-boosting therapies as part of a clinical trial. A South African hospital is the first government facility to perform robotic-assisted surgical procedures using the most technologically advanced surgical robots on the market. Here again is Clara Frank.
A surgical team led by Dr. Tim Forgan is using the Da Vinci Xi robot to assist in removing a cancerous rectal tumor from a patient at Tygerberg Public Hospital in Cape Town. The robot, which has 4 arms and is controlled in real time by Forgan via an immersive 3D console, is the most advanced surgical robot currently used in Africa. It is one of only 2 such robots on the continent, both of them found in Cape Town public hospitals.
Fortunately, the Western Cape Department of Health bought 2 Da Vinci robots, which is the Da Vinci Xi, which is the most technologically advanced robot, surgical robot that's currently available on the market. And what they're designed for, what they do is they allow you to work very, very finely and with great precision. And they magnify the image that you're seeing a lot more than normal laparoscopic stacks. So we can see much more detail. And then the instruments you can maneuver with a lot more accuracy and do finer work and get a better result, so you can preserve more organs that way.
The system is being used mainly for complex procedures. The first operation with the new robot occurred at Tygerberg Hospital in February. Since then, dozens more have been successfully completed.
The complication rate has definitely come down, and chatting to the patients post-operatively, they have a lot less nerve damage. You can see that their function is way better than what we had originally. And we were doing all these ops with keyhole surgery, so we were already doing them with very small cuts, people going home after 5 days, now 3 days. It's definitely improved their quality of life, and they all tell me they feel as if they haven't had an operation.
2 years ago, during the peak of COVID-19, the hospital also introduced a robot on wheels called Kenya to help patients connect with their relatives via video or voice call. Family members can dial into Kenya and visit patients remotely. Doctors and nurses use a phone app to steer the robot in and out of hospital wards to make it convenient for patients to easily communicate and request help they need from hospital staff.
This innovation like this one is very excellent, and also knowing that we just had a pandemic where family members couldn't get into the hospital. Now with this innovation, bringing your family members closer to you, since they can't be able to physically come into the hospital, that brings in a lot of relief, and also it's good psychologically for a patient as well. So this innovation, it's quite good.
Patients also benefit from high-tech surgery with shorter hospital stays, minimized post-operative pain, and reduced recovery time. Clara Frank, VOA News, Washington.
And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.